about Google Analytics 4. So this is an updated version of Google Analytics, as we've said. The old version is called Universal Analytics. So online, you'll often see acronym of UA, that is the old one. GA4 is the new one, okay? So there are a few changes to it. Number one is the event-based data versus the session-based data. So we'll talk a little bit more about exactly what that means as we get into the topic a little bit more, but basically keep in mind that there is a new data model. So any of your old data from your universal account, at this point, if you haven't brought it forward, it is gone. That's just the way it is. But if you transferred your account a year or so ago when it was required, some of your information would have come forward, but some of your history might not look the same since everything's not going to quite align properly anymore. The new version of Google Analytics introduces more machine learning, as we were talking about, and improved data privacy considerations. Caveat on improved, it really depends who you're talking to as to whether or not it is an improvement. It's an improvement if you're somebody who cares about data privacy. It is a step backwards if you're somebody who cares about getting the most precise data possible. So improved, let's put it that way. So with GA4, we can track and measure across websites and mobile apps. Today, we're going to be focused a little bit more on the website side of things. Most things that we talk about do kind of apply on both sides, but especially when I'm walking through, which I'll do briefly, how to set up your Google Analytics account, that will be mostly focused on the website side of things, just because it's a little bit easier for me to show off in this environment. So then Google Analytics gathers and processes all of that data to turn it into reports. So there's kind of a lot that goes into that. Sometimes that processing means that Google is kind of making guesses or basing the results on partial data. That's where some of that machine learning comes in. But in these cases, analytics does let you know. So it'll put a little, looks like kind of blue sparkles sort of next to any of the data that has been kind of thought up, or it will put I think it's a blue triangle with an exclamation mark in it to let you know when it is a result based on partial or sampled data. So overall, we are using analytics to let us know where users come from, what they do while they're on our sites. We use that information so we can know more about our customers, how we can reach them, what they're doing when they're on our site, and any problems they might be encountering. So sometimes a user might get caught in a login loop, for example, when they're trying to sign in or maybe place an order. So being able to track that type of progress through your website is also important. So I will be sending out these slides after the event. So there are some links throughout. You'll see at the bottom here is where you can get some more information on the difference between Universal Analytics and GA4. At this point, it's not as necessary to worry about that, especially since it sounds like most of you are kind of new to the program, so you might not care. But just in case you do, there it is. And also, if you have questions at any point throughout this, please just interrupt me. It's all good. If you want me to go back, whatever, all good. All right, so creating an account. If you do not have an analytics account and you've never started one before, your step one is to make a Google account. If you have Gmail, you're good. If you've got, depending, a work email that is set up through Gmail, you're probably good, depending on kind of the setup that your employer has placed on that account. Basically, you go to analytics.google.com. In this case here, we're at marketingplatform.google.com/about/analytics. Just as a nice introduction to, ooh, this is all the pretty stuff about what Google Analytics does. But we don't need to read this right now. We want to get started. So what's going to happen when I click on this, because I already have an account, it is going to load one of them. Now here's the key too, is figuring out which one it loads. I have multiple Google accounts as well as multiple Google Analytics accounts. So I always have to check to make sure I'm in the right one. Right now, it does the wrong one. So let's switch that to this one. And then once that reloads, so if you don't have an account already set up, then from this homepage, it will be bringing you right into the page to set up your new account. If you have an existing account, then, and you want to set up a new one, then you will open up analytics. You'll get on a page sort of like this. This is one that the project has only just started, so the analytics isn't running yet. You will open your admin panel, which is from the left side bar. We'll go to admin. And then once all of this loads, we'll see up in the top left corner, there's this white plus button that says create. So we have the option to create an account or a property. So let's talk for a second about actually the difference between these two things, because they are related. The account, that encompasses your entire organization. So if I am doing an analytics project for Hackforge, I will create one account for Hackforge. Within that, I might set up multiple properties. One property for the Hackforge main website, one property for a special website that we've set up for an event, for example. One property would be for our mobile app if we had one. Let's pretend that we do. So we'd be able to have all of those different digital assets connected under the larger umbrella of that account. And then we would be able to set some details and different information about each one of those properties at an individual level. So when we're in here creating, we are going to create a new account. And this is honestly pretty straightforward. It walks you through. So let's go, we'll call it Hackforge demo. It really gives you the steps and talks you through everything you need to do. So I don't want recommendations for my business. I don't want technical support for this one, but yes, it can model some of my data and give business insights. I'm fine with that. So next, and then we need the property details. Because we've created the account, now we need the property within the account. Each account can have more than one property, but needs to have at least one. So it forces you to create it when you get started. So we'll call this August 13th because that's what it is. I'm not really going to worry about my settings here because you guys don't care to see me click a few times just to change time zones. We all know how time zone works, right? Anybody not know what a time zone is? Perfect, great. Okay, next. All right, so the size of our business, this is just Google kind of gathering some information. Let's say we're arts and entertainment because why not? So what we choose here under choose business objectives, don't stress too much about this, especially when you're first setting it up, because these can always be changed. Basically what this does is it sets you up with a few starting points for reports. So if you're not sure, just go with baseline reports. That's, you know, a pretty good way to introduce yourself to it, to kind of know what's going on. And then as always, terms and conditions. We should probably switch that to the right one though. Yeah. Exact. Okay. Now it is creating. So in order to collect our data, we need to know what we're collecting data from. So as I mentioned earlier, today we're focusing a little bit more on the website side of things. So keep in mind too that even if it is a website that's being accessed on a mobile device, that's still a website, right? So it's only like an actual app if we're accessing it through the app store. This one, sometimes people get confused because they're like, oh, but it's a web app, so that means I need to list it as an app. But nope, web is there, so we go with the web setup. We're good on that? Yeah, cool. Nice. So then when we're setting up our web stream, we need to let it know what our domain is and what we want to call the data stream, so that when we're finding it in our configuration settings later on, we are able to easily locate it. There's a very angry dog outside. Okay, so we'll do the Hackforge one. We'll call it August 13th. So this enhanced measurement one, you can choose to turn on or off. I recommend keeping it on. It just gives you a few more event types that it will measure automatically for you is worth doing. So then we will create and continue. Yeah. So after this point is when we would have to actually connect our data to our website. So there are a couple different ways to do this, depending on how your website is created. So if you are using WordPress, for example, so let's take a look at the Hackforge website. So on WordPress, we're going to have to bring in a specific plugin in order to set up analytics. So we use one for lightweight Google Analytics, just because we're not too intense about our analytics here at Hackforge, and we don't want anything to slow our website down. We find that this is sufficient for our needs. Depending on what you want, though, you might not get everything that you're looking for out of this plugin, so you might want to go for something else. But basically, we take our tracking ID, this one. So in this one here, it's telling us to use the Google tag, but if we don't have the Google tag, we can copy the code here and paste that in, but we don't want to do that. So we're going to do this one. We're going to get our tracking code from in here. Interesting. I mean, I made it, so I should have access to it. We'll see. Oh, this is again because of too many Google accounts.
The other one.
Yeah, right, exactly. So this was Hackforge demo. There we go. So there's our account, and here is our property. There it is. So if you ever need to switch between them, it is always up here in the top leftish corner. It'll tell you which account and property you have selected. You can go through there to find the right one.
Account and have multiple properties.
Say that again?
One account can have multiple properties.
One account can have multiple properties, correct. But one property can only be connected to one account, right? I mean, I guess if I wanted to, I could probably set it up multiple, but then I'd have to put the tracking code in it multiple times. And I don't think it would like that. I've honestly never tried. Now I'm curious. I'm not going to try it today, but that is something that I might play around with later on just to see what happens. So when we want to get into all of our setup, so we can look in here at our data streams to see which streams we have set up. This one here called August 13th. So it's telling us here that it isn't active because it's not seeing any data come in, and it's letting us know that it might be because it's too new or I just didn't set it up right. So I would copy this measurement ID and then paste it into what they're calling the tracking ID here in WordPress. Most drag and drop or low code web site generators these days will have something similar to this. What's another one? Wix is an example that we can take a look at as well. But even if you're using, I don't know, Square or one of those other ones that exists, they should all have something like this as well. If you have coded your own website, then you're going to want to be using either Google Tag Manager or pasting the entire code snippet into the header of every page on your website that you want to be tracking. So in Wix, we go into settings all the way to the bottom to advanced, marketing integrations. This one's already set up, but we can see in here that once again, we're able to add the analytics ID. It's there, so we don't have to do it again, but it's more or less the same process, no matter which one of these low code type website builders you're using. Yeah.
So these low code interfaces, so if I put my tracking code in there, what's to stop them from like aggregating all the codes that they from all their client base and using this information for their own?
So just because they have the tracking code doesn't mean they have access to where the data surfaces.
Okay, so they don't have access to they can't with that get into your stats and analytics.
No, they're not going to be getting into your Google Stats and Analytics, but they are still going to have some they're still going to know a bit about what's going on your website because you're hosting your website through.
So they have their own activity. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so really, yeah, so any type of specific specificity though for your website, other than what they get from the hosting.
Yeah, exactly. So if you were setting up like your own specific key events in Google Analytics, Wix is not going to know what those are. So they're not going to be able to track those. Only anybody with access to either your Google account or if you give their account access to your property. So same idea when I went to open it and it's like, oh, you don't have access to this because I was logged into the wrong account. That's what they would see, even if they had the tracking code.
But don't they have their own rudimentary parade built into their page?
Something
So
in
they
here.
can just open the door there.
Yeah, you open the door there, but I mean, if you don't want anybody to know anything that you're doing,
And code your stuff.
stay off the internet. Yeah.
Don't use a third party. We'll just, yeah, write your HTML.
Yeah. There's always going to be somebody tracking what you're doing online because 2024, man, it is the way of the world. So once we had connected our code to so we've connected our tracking code to our website. 24 to 48 hours later, it's going to start serving data into our account. This one has nothing. Let's go to one that would have something. None of those ones. Maybe this one. Or is this the old one? Wait, this is the active one. So this one has data coming into it. Is it impressive data? Not really, because Windsor Hackforge has a pretty narrow scope of Windsor. So there's really, even if everybody in Windsor visited our website, our numbers would still look pretty lackluster compared to some of the bigger sites out there. So moving on from that, those are the basics of how to create an account. I know that was a really quick kind of run through all of that, but honestly, it's quite simple once you get started. It does really walk you through step by step of the process on its own, but then the Google documentation does a pretty good job of keeping you up on that as well. So once I send out the slides following tonight's event, you'll be able to follow this link to get those step-by-step instructions. So before we move into the terminology, does anybody have any questions? Look in the chat. It's not so Rob has introduced himself over here. So Rob owns a company called Baseline Consulting. He has a couple hobby websites for items he sells on Amazon. Very cool. So he's trying to run some Google Analytics on those. The experience is average at best. Average at best is a great starting point. Welcome, Rob. Thank you so much for introducing yourself. How's everybody in the room doing? Good. Yeah.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
Is it hosted on Google Cloud only, or is it separately like a separate kind of a enterprise by Google, the Google Analytics?
So if you wanted to like host an on-premise version of Google Analytics, I don't know that that is possible. You could probably download your data and then host it yourself somewhere else.
Okay.
But Google is still always going to want access to your data. So I don't think they're ever going to make it so that you can completely take it out of their hands. It's a good question, though. It's a good one. I know you can connect to, what do they call it? BigQuery, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. So there are different ways to connect with some of those other Google services.
Okay.
So that might be what you're interested in. Josh says, has Google ever offered an on-prem Google service? Thinking in my brain about that, Josh, I think no. That seems opposite of what they go for. But if anybody can think of anything Google that has ever been offered on-prem, let us know. Josh agrees. He also thinks no. So you asked the question knowing the answer. I like your style, Josh. All right, so let's talk about some terminology. So understanding the language that is being, I'm teasing you, Josh, you're fine thinking not knowing the answer. It's all good. All right, so knowing the language that we're using is really important to understand the reports that we're going to be reading once we are looking through all of our gathered data. So we're gonna start at the most basic and kind of build on these concepts as we go. So first, let's talk about sessions. A session initiates when a user visits your website and when no other session is currently active. So for example, I have two analytics tabs. If both of these were, let's say, the Hackforge website, this would not count as two sessions because I can only have one active session at a time. It also won't start. So if I, right click, open a new tab, so it's just kind of opened in the background like this, the session doesn't officially start until I bring that tab to the foreground. So now the session would start, and then it would still be running as I click away from it back to my slideshow. Once I leave 30 minutes where it's not doing anything, then the session will end. Or if I close, then that session has also ended. Make sense? So an engaged session is like a very specific kind of session. So it's any session that lasts longer than 10 seconds or has a key event or has at least 2 page views. We'll talk more about what key events are in a few minutes, but the concept of lasting longer than 10 seconds, I think we all probably know what we mean there. 2 page views would be, for example, 1 page view, 2 page views, right? So this would now count as an engaged session. So this concept of engaged session kind of replaces what would have been known as bounces in universal analytics. So basically you would see what would count as a bounce anytime someone opened your web page and closed it within 5 or 10 seconds without having actually interacted with anything on the website. Now, instead of counting those as a bounce, we just count them as a session, and then they're not counted as engaged. So we're still kind of tracking the same thing, but it A, sounds nicer, and B, I think is a little bit more realistic in terms of what is going on. Because even if it is a bounce, somebody still did follow a link, they got to your site somehow, so it's still kind of worth knowing as opposed to just discounting it off the bat, which is a little bit more of what bounces were doing. So yeah, I think that's good for these. Let's then talk about users. So a session is initiated by a user. So we will have the total users. This is the complete number of unique users who visited your site in the specified date range. So anybody who opened your web page, they count as a user. A new user is someone who visited your site for the first time. An active user is someone who had an engaged session. So again, that's 10 seconds or more, 2 or more page views, and at least 1 key event. And then a returning user would be someone who has already. Yeah, go ahead. That's good. We've got some chairs over there. We've got another one back here. Stop. All good. So returning user is anyone who has initiated at least 1 other session. So basically they are not a new user. So let's run through some examples. So we have someone who is a first-time visitor to our website and they have made a purchase. Does this person count as a new user?
Yes.
Yes, they are a new user. Are they an active user?
No.
They're not active. Why aren't they active?
Because
Oh, yeah, active.
we need to
Because
match
I'm
it with the
purchasing.
time range which we are taking like a threshold, then it would be active, I think.
Okay, they've made a purchase.
Yeah, they're
Because
making
they're active in the
purchases,
sense
like,
of,
Okay, that's particular.
they're connected.
Yeah, so if we look here at active users, so active are folks who have engaged with the site in the given time range. And to have engaged with the site means that they have 10 seconds, at least 2 page views, or a key event. Now, the key event we haven't talked about yet. It is possible that they could make a purchase in less than 10 seconds. How likely is it that they could make a purchase with only a single page view, though? Possible, I suppose.
If they have added in the
But
cart
they- I'm like
already.
in 10 seconds. They have to search and.
Right, yeah, it's unlikely. So I think it's safe to assume that somebody who makes that purchase is going to be an active user. So something that'll make sense a little bit more in the future as well is triggering the new user specification, I suppose, as a user type counts as a key event pretty much always. So just the fact that they are new automatically makes them active as well. But we'll talk a little bit more about that coming up. So then last, would they count as a total user?
It will be.
Because total is everybody. If they went to the site, they are total. Okay, so a first-time visitor who does not make a purchase. Are they new?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Are they active?
Can be.
Can be.
Can be.
Depends on the scenario, I think.
Yes, it depends on the scenario, but it's highly likely that they are going to be counted as an active user because they're triggering the new user event, which pretty much always counts as a key event. That one's a trick question, so. And then would they be a total user?
Yes.
Yeah, everybody's a total user. Okay, what about a returning visitor who opens the homepage and then leaves? Are they new? No. Correct. Are they active? No. Assuming that the homepage was open for less than 10 seconds, not active. Are they total?
Yes.
Yeah, everybody's total. All right, one more. You guys are doing great. A returning user who watches a video. Are they new?
No.
No.
Active.
Active?
Yes.
Probably, yeah. And then total, because everybody's total. So that kind of gives us a sense of how these are tracked. So when we're seeing different user types in our reports, then we would be able to, now we're able to understand a little bit more of what's going on there. So I'm just taking a quick look here in the chat. Got some more, oh, just more people talking about on-prem Google. Love it. Good conversation in there. Okay, so hits. I want to talk about this one for a minute. Even people who have never used Google Analytics before have probably heard the term hits. How many hits did your web page have today? I had 500 hits last week. This is not really a concept quite the same in Google Analytics. Everything that was previously one of the various hit types is now considered an event. So if you are looking in GA4 in the dashboard for something that says hits, just like bounce rates, it's not something you're really going to be able to find because it's just not there. Again, hey, welcome. Come on in, have a seat. There's a chair there. There's a chair there. So there'll be a link to some more reading on this once you get the slides if you're interested. But basically, if we just keep in mind that hits doesn't really mean anything anymore, it will help. So events, this is what I mentioned as having replaced hits. So an event tracks anything that happens on the website, but it needs to be defined in advance. So when we were setting up our web stream, if you remember that I had the option to turn on and off some advanced tracking or advanced analytics, it was calling it, that was just deciding whether or not some additional event types would be turned on. I would have the option to turn those event types on later, even if I didn't as soon as I was setting it up, but we cannot retroactively gather data. So if I was not gathering information on how many people purchased tickets until this week, anybody who purchased tickets last week, I cannot bring that data into Google Analytics because it doesn't exist, right? So some of the preset events are going to be things like scrolling, clicks, like number of page views, anytime you follow outbound links, things like that. But then you can also set up custom events with varying degrees of difficulty, and you will determine what you want your custom events to be based really on what the goals of your website are or your app. So a custom event could be a ticket purchase, it could be a newsletter sign up. You don't have to necessarily spell tickets as TIX. I just chose to here as an example, but really you can do that however you like. Then we get into key events. So these were formerly called conversions up until only a few months ago. So as you might have noticed when I was opening some of the analytics accounts, it was bringing up a banner, I think along the top, sometimes it's a modal pop-up, where it's just saying like, hey, conversions have been renamed. Now they're called key events. It's confusing and it's annoying, but it's actually a good move in this case, because previously we had conversions meaning one thing in Google Analytics and something else in Google Ads, especially because analytics and ads kind of work so closely together. Having the same term mean two different things is a recipe for disaster. So renaming makes sense. So key event is formerly called a conversion. So basically this is an action defined by an admin as something that you particularly care about. So this will be based on your business goals. So when we were talking earlier about what determines an engaged session, and I said it can trigger a key event. And so even if that happens in less than 10 seconds or in fewer than 2 page views, it still makes the session count as engaged. It's because it is key event. We've decided we care about that. And that can be anything. It can be a preset event. It can be a custom event. You can have more than one of them. There's a limit. I don't remember what it is right now, but the website calls it out very specifically when you're setting those up. So when you're determining what you want a key event to be, that's why you'll want to think about what the goals of your website and of your tracking are, right? So if you want to sell something, then you would want a key event to be every time someone successfully checks out. You might want it to be every time somebody puts something in their cart, but you might not want it to be. It could also change. Maybe when you first start, you want to count it as a key event every time somebody puts an item in their cart, but eventually you have so many customers and so much data that it's no longer relevant every time someone puts it in the cart, just when they check out. So then you can change it too. Again, you cannot retroactively adjust your data, so you cannot add something that wasn't there before, but you can make changes. Everybody doing okay? Yeah, that's good. Okay. So now we're talking a little bit more about the data itself. So dimensions versus metrics. Dimensions are a characteristic of the data. They're always going to be text. So this is scoped to a specific level. So this means grouped or aggregated at the user, session, or event level. So a dimension will apply to either the user or the session or the event. So examples of the dimension would be like the city or the browser or the device type. So if we were taking a look down at this table here, the dimension is the city. So we can see that it is showing up in the rows here. So each row is one dimension. And we will then have metrics to count those dimensions. So metrics are calculable measurements. So you can remember measurement, metric, they've kind of got the same start there, right? So these are always a number. It could be an event count. It could be the cost per click. As long as it's a number, it counts as the metric. So in the case of our tiny table, our users are the metric, which is appearing in the column. So that idea of dimension showing in rows and metrics showing in columns is something that you will experience throughout most of Google Analytics. I can't actually think of an example right now where that would be switched, unless maybe you switched it on purpose. But by default, I think all reports are going to show up that way. And in reports, you can combine your metrics and your dimensions. There will be cases where some of them don't necessarily combine nicely. Again, I can't think of an example, but it will happen. Basically, anytime a metric and a dimension are incompatible, you're just going to see something grayed out, or it's just not going to be an option there, right? So we'll see if we can find one of those later on if we have time. See how that goes. But yes, metrics versus dimensions. These are two really important terms to know and understand. I think we've got a lot of folks in here with kind of that data analysis background. You all are probably familiar with these? Yeah, okay. For anybody who does not have that data analytics background, let me know if you have any questions about this. This one is seriously so important. It's going to make all of your life so much more easy if you understand dimension versus metric. So don't hesitate to ask a question about it. So let's start to bring it all together and see kind of where it all ties in. So we start at the top of our hierarchy with a user. Each user can have a session or multiple sessions, not at the same time, but if I start one session and end it and then start another one, that is now one user with multiple sessions. And in each session, we can have multiple events. Some of those events might be key, some of them might not be, but this is kind of the basic idea. Of course, this could branch out further from that. Users could have more than 2 sessions, but this is just to give you the idea. So what we're looking at here, our dimension examples of our kind of users. So we are looking at users who are between the age of 35 and 44, who are female, who are located in Canada or using a VPN that says they're located in Canada, and the source is paid. So they followed a paid link, Google ad or something, to get to our website. Information about the session would be like our device type, the length of the session, which I actually think they don't count anymore. I should update this. And the source of that session was organic. So they didn't follow a referral link. They didn't follow an ad. They maybe clicked on the link in our social media post, and that was how they got here. And then the event was that they purchased a concert ticket. So when we're looking at this, why do user and session have separate sources?
Because it can be reachable, I think, from anywhere on the web. There can be different ways to reach the same destination. Like as you said, one can be a paid, like someone took a VPN and someone is doing it organically, like by just clicking, just, learning on the go, just by default. In curiosity, some people just click something different.
Sure. So that is true. In this case, this is all one user, and the user has a specific source, which is paid, but then the session has a specific source, which is organic. So how do we end up with both of those simultaneously?
Okay, it's the same user here.
Yeah, this is all one user.
Same user can use web and mobile.
Yes, the same user can use web and the mobile. What's really happening here is every time a user visits your website, they are starting a new session, but they only ever have their first visit once, right? So whatever source brought that user to your website for the first time is always going to be the source of that user, right? And then the next time on a return visit, then the user source stays the same for whatever it was for that first visit, but now this session has a source that is organic in this case, because that's how they got there this time in particular. Are we following that one? Yeah, it's kind of goofy and like doesn't feel obvious. Yeah, it's not as much fun, but yes. So this also lets us know that this is a returning user, right? We could tell that as well because we do have another session going on over here, and this might not necessarily be the first session, but it likely is based on what we're seeing here. Okay, so as I said, there might be other sessions that had happened. If there were, why might we not be seeing other information related to this user? Perhaps this user has actually visited our website 6 times. Why would we only be seeing 2 of them here? Why might we?
Incognito mode.
Incognito mode, good one. What'd you say?
And one is the active session and one is the first time session.
Ooh, that's a good one. Okay. I think you're kind of getting at the same thing, but we're just saying it different ways. Basically, filtering, right? There's something that's determined why we are not seeing some of that other data. Filters, they're very exciting. Basically, filters remove data, not permanently, from our data set so that we can kind of drill into what we might be most interested in. So in this case, we don't have enough information to truly know, but there are a few filters that might have been added to this data set to get it looking like it currently does. So what user filters might be in use here?
Age filters should be gender, age, demographics, and location.
Yeah, exactly, right? Because we're seeing that it is someone between 35 and 44 who is female, who's located in Canada, and who got their paid, right? So that could be the filter, or it could be a session filter. What might we be filtering on in terms of session dimensions that would result in this data set?
Session,
So that again?
active session, and
That's a good one. Yeah. Active session, it could be the date of the session, the device that they're on, or again, the source. So how they got to our website. We could also be filtering based on the events. We don't really have enough information to know quite what would be going on with there. But basically, we could have it filtered by the event name or whether or not it is a key event. Since this literally just says event, we don't really know. But yes, so there's lots of different ways that we could get here. So some filters that are pretty much always applied would be session date. So you can't really not have a session date filter. There's always going to be a start point and an end point, right? There are usually maximums on the amount on the period of time that you're able to use, but at best, whenever you first turned on Google Analytics is going to be kind of your start, and then your end is going to be probably 24 hours ago, depending on the report that you're looking at. You might be able to get something a little bit more recent than that. Okay, so then let's take a look at how this would all come together with multiple users. So what we're actually seeing here is I was too lazy to make that little graphic different for a bunch of different users. So it is just the same thing kind of repeated a whole bunch going on in here. So if we aggregate that data, we're able to see that there are 10 active users. 100% of them happen to be female. And since all of them have the exact same session length, that also means that the average session length is the same. But even if it were different, we would be averaging it out. Everybody knows how average is calculated? Yeah, okay. So aggregation, we get that concept. So what would be the most common source in this data set? So remember, it's 10 that look the exact same. Here's a close-up so that we can remember. So what is the most common source of all of these sessions and users that we're looking at?
is it about the first time or the returning it?
There we go. That's it. I was tricking you and you got it. You called me out on it. Exactly. So this is when we're talking about which scope we're looking at in terms of what that source is. So then we're talking about user acquisition and traffic acquisition, because we can't make it simple. Since we use the phrase or the term source elsewhere, why can't we just call it user source and traffic source or session source, right? Because that would be too simple. So instead we call it acquisition, but it's still talking about where those users and sessions came from. So the point that we were making here is that just asking what is the most common source is not a detailed enough question, because we actually have two sources, the source for the user and the source for the session. So if we were asking for the most common user source, it would be user source. Hey, there we go. Okay. And the most common session source would be organic. Yes. Okay. So user, yeah, question.
Seeing a third thing on our data of our site here, I see user acquisition, traffic acquisition results, and then user acquisition cohorts. Okay, that's correct.
I don't have that in the slides,
Okay.
but we can get into that after.
No worries.
Yeah, no, it's all good. There's a lot that it kind of goes through in there, and I wanted to get some of the basic concepts out of the way first, and then we'll dive into that after. So User acquisition, the first source by which a user reached our website. Traffic acquisition is the most recent source by which a user reached our website. So in that case, it is talking about sessions, right? But only very, very specific sessions. If you visited the Hackforge website every day this week, the first time you visited it was this week, and you've done it 5 times since then because you really like our website, your user acquisition was, let's say, Facebook, because you got there by clicking on a Facebook post. But your last time visiting was direct because you just typed Hackforge into your browser. So then your traffic acquisition would have been direct, even though your user acquisition is, what did I say? Facebook, social. Then if you visit it again right now, but this time you got to it because you clicked on a Google ad, then your traffic now counts as paid because it came from that paid Google ad. Okay, so user, first time, traffic, most recent time. Okay, what's going on in the chat here? More stuff about Google on-prem, great. All right, questions about acquisition, traffic versus user? It's good, okay. So now we're going to talk a little bit about UTM codes. This is a method that marketers will use to track a little bit more specific information about their links. So, has anybody here used UTM codes before? No? Okay, that's totally fine. Basically, these are a lifesaver, but a huge pain in the ass because they don't look very nice, right? The only thing that we need out of this URL in order to actually land where we want on the website is up to the end of this 2024. The question mark and everything to the right of it, that's our UTM code that sends information to Google Analytics, but does not actually impact where the link is taking you. So anytime that you're copying a link to send to somebody else, if you're like, ew, gross, that link is so long, I don't want to send that in a text message, you can delete anything to the right of that question mark and you're not going to break your link. Okay, so that's always nice to know. So really what this does is helps tell Google how to organize your data. It's going to do its best to organize this data in a useful way, but sometimes you want to do something specific that Google can't manage on its own. So for example, we might be running 2 different ads. One ad has Steve's face on it. The other ad has Dr. Elie's face on it. And we want to know which face gets more clicks, okay? So we will use a different UTM code because we still want them to go, we want everybody to land on the same page in our website. But by switching out the UTM code, we can track which link is actually being used more often, right? It can also help to test the performance of different social platforms because often those will just get lumped as social without really defining whether it was Twitter or X, I suppose, Instagram or LinkedIn or Facebook or Truth Social or what have you. And sometimes referrals from newsletters and email can get a little bit weird. Google can't always parse those depending. So this is a way to kind of be a little bit more specific in those. So when we want to customize our data organization, we use the UTM codes, but it's important to kind of know what they mean and then how to find it. Fun note, in case you want something really cool to talk about at your next party, the U in UTM stands for urchin. It's like urchin tracking measurement module. I always forget the M, but urchin tracking is the fun part there. That was what this technology was originally called when they started it. We don't really use that anymore. But I guess the idea being that like urchins are like sticky, spiky little guys, right? So this sticks to the user to track them along so we can tell kind of what's going on. UTM. So as we mentioned, everything to the right of the question mark is our UTM code. So we can type all of this manually if we know what we want to type, or we can use a tool like the campaign URL builder, which I have open right here. So this makes it a little bit easier where I'm able to just put in my URL and then all of the different values for our different UTM parameters. We'll talk about what each one is. And then at the end, it spits out our final link. So that's what the full link looks like, but we also might want to shorten it. So this does provide a link shortener as well, where it tells a little bit less, but the end result is still the same. It takes us to wherever it was that we wanted to go. Great Lakes Chamber Music Festival. We don't want to become a season ticket holder. So was I just an active, was that an active session on their website? Yes, why?
No, sorry, because it was less than 10 seconds.
True, but I might have been a new user. I'm honestly not sure. If I was a new user, then it would count as an engaged session, right? Because
Okay.
new user is that key event that is triggered just by the fact that I'm there for the first time. So therefore we are engaged.
Okay.
So I'm probably not a new user considering I already had that link in my browser for some reason, but really I wasn't giving you enough information there to know. If we were not counting the new user tag, then correct, I would not have been an engaged user because I only looked at one page, I didn't actually do anything, and it was less than 10 seconds. Good. Okay. So what we have in here then is our parameters. So anywhere we see this UTM underscore blah, so in this case, source, medium, or campaign, that is our parameter. And then we have an equal sign followed by the value. So whatever this value is right here, that is what we are actually putting in. So that we choose what that says, and we choose it to be something that makes sense to us so that when we're looking at our reports later on, we understand what's going on. Each parameter is separated using the ampersand that we see right there. Yeah, ampersand. Okay, and then link to the campaign URL builder. So when putting together our UTM codes, it's important to know what each section of the code means. So we saw that the first one here was the source, and in this case, it says newsletter. So the source is always going to be the specific platform that's sending the visitor. Now, okay, I say always going to be, but really you could put whatever you want. If you wanted to put the source was unicorns, there's nobody to tell you you can't do that. It's not going to make any sense. And if anybody aside from you tries to use your Google Analytics account, they're going to be like, what is unicorns? That's not a source. But if it makes sense to you, it's good enough. General examples would be something like newsletter, Facebook, YouTube, but while there's rules, they're not enforceable rules, okay? So in Google Analytics, you're going to be looking for session source, and that's always going to be your UTM source. UTM medium, this is the type of traffic being sent. So organic versus paid, email, direct, and that's going to be under session medium. Those two are the only UTM parameters that you have to have in order for the UTM tracking code to actually work. These next ones are all optional. So content, an example of that one would be what I said with Steve's face versus Dr. Ali's face. We would have one content is maybe S, one content is A, or we can use full words, whatever we feel like. But it's just ways for us to differentiate different elements of the same ad that generally lead to the same place. They could also refer to a specific element in the email. So in Google Analytics, you'll look for session, manual, ad, content. Was there a question over here? No? Okay. And then our campaign, if we have the name of a specific marketing campaign, you know, you're running a sale for the spring or early bird or whatever, you can use that. UTM ID, this is a newer one, and this is only necessary if you are using Google Ads. When running Google Ads, then there will be an auto-generated ID added to each ad. So by including that in your UTM code, it's then easier to connect your Google Analytic data, your link click data, back to your Google Ads data. So you can compare, Google Ads says I got 12 clicks, but Google Analytics says I got 8. They're overcharging me on clicks, that kind of thing. I don't know if that would actually happen. Anything's possible. Yeah.
Could you just quickly show once again like how you wrote the UTM code?
Absolutely. This one?
No.
Oh, this one?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. So this is where we put our URL. So this is where we want users to land.
Okay.
And then this is showing them in a different order than I did. So I talked about source first. So our source was the newsletter.
Okay.
So I'll put that in here. And the campaign medium was email because the newsletter goes out over email. It could just as easily be like Facebook and then social, right? And
If
then,
we are following that particular content, then this will come. If I'm coming through some other email, then what will happen? Like you will create one more UTM code?
yes, so that's the thing. That's what can get really annoying about UTM codes is you have to make a bunch of them, right? I would have to make a separate UTM tracking code for the link in my newsletter and for the link on my Facebook and for the link on my LinkedIn. And then for a link that I might have put on a website for a story that they're running on us, right?
So if you're doing an A/B testing, then we have to create these 2 different or whatever, like how many sources we have to create a different link for each of them and then understand which one is doing better.
Yeah,
Okay.
right. And then, yeah, then you have to kind of remember too which link, like which UTM code relates to which ad, right? So that's why using descriptive names, so like using Steve, we know it's the ad with Steve in it, right?
Okay.
But if we're trying to compare 2 of them that are too similar and we didn't use any sort of naming or we didn't keep track, we might not remember which UTM code applied to which graphic content, right? So you can get, you can deal with that using the name of the graphic file could align with the copy that you're using in your UTM code. You could make it descriptive based on the content or the color, different ways like that. But yeah, you really get into like managing your data so that you know what is what when it comes to this. Yeah. An example that I had with a client recently actually was there is a link floating around somewhere that they don't know where that has an old UTM tracking code connected to it. So they're seeing traffic come into their website using the campaign name from a campaign that was like 4 years ago, but they don't know where this link is.
Okay.
Right? And that's not great. There's lots of ways that could happen. It could have been that maybe an events calendar that's run by a community member, they copied a link and put that in their website, but they left the UTM tracking code. And that UTM tracking code came from a Facebook post from 4 years ago. So it has that in there. So now anytime somebody comes to our website through that link on that community calendar, Google Analytics actually thinks that they got there from a Facebook post.
So it's not like you can just like do a search on your own server because it's not even on the server.
Not necessarily, right? It could be, but it might not be. Yeah. And your UTM tracking code is going to override whatever Google would have been picking up if that UTM weren't there.
Okay.
Yeah. So it can get messy. But it can be very useful. So there's like pros and cons and really thinking about your strategy. So yes, UTM tracking codes, confusing, but helpful all at the same time. How are we feeling about those? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. This is good. Honestly, this URL builder, very helpful. Highly recommend. The link to it, again, is in all of the stuff. But also if you just search like UTM generator, this is what will come up as the first option. Okay, so we talked about those. A few tips for writing those, just some things to keep in mind. Capitalization counts because data. Anybody with the data background will be like, yeah, of course, capitalization counts. But anybody who is, I just work in digital marketing. I know how to use Facebook and I can run a Facebook ad. Why does it matter if I use capitalization differently? Because it is different. It just is. Just accept it. The best way to go is to just stick to lowercase letters and you never have to worry about it. Because if I were to create one link, the link is the exact same across all platforms. The only difference is this capitalization with capital E or capital M or no capitals. It's 3 different answers actually, right? So Google is going to count all 3 of those separately. If we stick to lowercase, we don't have to worry about it. This is going to particularly become a problem in larger organizations where you've got more than one person creating these tracking codes. So setting up standards that everyone has to adhere to, like lowercase, makes everybody's lives easier. You also don't have to use every parameter. Just because they're there doesn't mean you have to use them. In this cheat sheet that I had in this little chart here, I have marked which 2 are required. The rest of these, only use them if you need them. If you're not actually running a paid Google ad, don't worry about the ID. If it's not a specific marketing campaign, you don't really want to be able to look at the data for all of this set of ads together, you don't have to worry about using the campaign. Or if you do want to be able to look at all of these sets of ads together, but you don't care about being able to track Steve's face versus Dr. Ali's face, then you don't have to worry about UTM content, right? You've got your options there. Don't use more than you absolutely need. Again, planning ahead will be your friend. Okay. So how are we doing on time? We're doing great on time, actually. It's only 1/4 after. So now we'll move into some navigation of getting around in Google Analytics 4 and how to see and how to find some of these data points that we've been talking about. So we'll switch back to over here. Good. Okay. So our homepage is going to look generally like this at the top, but every user, even if they're the user of the same property, same account, they're going to get a little bit of different information below the fold on the homepage. Below the fold is anything that you have to see, you have to scroll to see it, right? So it says here that these are suggestions for me based on the information that I usually look at when I come onto this account. So it's showing me recently accessed as well as regularly accessed, things like that. So these are just kind of quick snapshots and links elsewhere in the site. But what's really interesting to see here on the homepage is the active users. So how many people have visited the site in the last 30 minutes? 1. It was probably me. Let's see how long it actually takes for this next user to show up, unless I might have IP filtering turned on. Steve, do you have your computer on?
Yeah,
Are you still connected to the University of Windsor Wi-Fi?
I'm connected to your Wi-Fi.
Now you're connected to our Wi-Fi? Okay, it might not work then. I'll do it on my phone. Okay. So you're not going to be able to see it quite the same.
You can also view in real time on mine, actually.
Yes, so what's happening? The reason that the real time is not working here is because I've actually turned on some filtering so that anybody accessing from the IP address in this office is not going to show up in our analytics. The reason behind that is I go on this website 5,000 times a day, and that is really going to skew my numbers. So instead, I filter it out. Now, does it suck? Because it means that if all of you guys visit our site, that's not showing up. I mean, sure, but you guys all visiting my site while you're in the room with me is not what I'm worried about. It's that too. Who went on the site?
I did through the U Windsor.
Through the U Windsor
There you
one.
go.
Yeah, thank you. There we go.
So you have put the filter
All
for
the
this room, the
infrastructure.
Wi-Fi for this.
Yes, so the IP address for the router in here. So if I were to go home and join from there, bring this computer home, go to our website from this computer, but connected to my home network, then it's going to show up, right? If I did it from here on my phone, not connected to the Wi-Fi, then it would show up. But if it was on my phone connected to the Wi-Fi, wouldn't show up. Right.
The mobile network, maybe I go.
Yeah.
to.
Exactly.
Oh, 3.
Right. Yeah. See, we got more people going on the site. This is very exciting. It's fun to see those numbers go up in real time, right? So The note about being able to filter out internal traffic is helpful, though. If anyone is interested in doing that, let me know, because there are honestly some steps to it that I have worked with a professional website designer who does this for a living, and he set up somebody's Google Analytics, and he's like, yeah, I turned on internal visit filters. It's all good. Yeah, he didn't do it right. So they were still getting their internal traffic coming through their reports, which is not what we want. So please feel free to reach out to me if you have questions about setting that one up. It's working?
Yeah,
Yay! That's great.
although, when I try to get in, from my phone, it gives me, this error.
There's an error.
Yeah. No,
Okay, this. I have been losing my mind over that error. So it's giving us that your connection is not private, but then once you get through it, it is coming up as HTTPS. So it is secure, but for some reason it's like, no, you're not secure. And why is it doing that? Because it hates me. I'm sure it's not that.
Is that your SSL? Like, what are you using for your certificate? Do you do it yourself?
That is,
Or do you?
so do I do it myself? No. Does Doug do it myself? Yes. So Doug is the chair of the Hackforge board. He's also my colleague at P42.
Well, I'm just gonna send him this image.
Oh, I sent it to him as well. Him and I have both pulled our hair out trying to figure out why this is being the way that it is.
But I enjoy vexing him, so it's going.
He will be vexed indeed. So that's a whole other issue as to why that's happening, because I honestly don't know. Right.
I had the same problem.
Yeah.
It was I was using the easy SSL. Then I had a subdomain using a high-end SSL for a funnel, and it was blowing me out of the water. So if you're using a subdomain with different SSL, like maybe in your apps or something like that,
Mhm.
that could kill it. And Edge will get finicky. Which I'm using Edge. It goes
Well,
wild.
that's your problem. You're using Edge.
Yeah.
Just weird. Opera or nothing, Steve. No, I'm joking. You're good. Yeah, I think right now, the Let's Encrypt cert is expiring, and then I don't know, maybe we'll start fresh, or we'll go somewhere else, or we'll see what we can do to make that
I
work.
saw that I had to redo the SSL on all the subdomains and then it's fine then, but if there's anything out of sync, it starts getting weird.
Yeah, because it hates me personally, really is the thing. Back to this. Okay, so yes, real-time report, super cool. Next to our real-time report, over here a little bit to the left, we've got kind of an overview of some specific stats. So our number of users. Now, what I want to cover here? This just says users. Before, whenever I was talking about users, we said, like, what was it? Engaged user, total user, new users. This just says users. What does that mean? Anybody have any guesses?
Is it a metric defined there to count? Like as you mentioned in the earlier, like dimension and metric, that was actually my follow-up question, but I brought it now. So like in metrics, is it like a calculated field, you define it, or is it the Google Analytics doing for you? I mean, I know it's a back-end thing, but just to know like how it's updating that. Suppose like now one user has logged in, right? Now it's 4, but that hasn't changed that count. I mean, that user's count.
This one here?
Why
Yes.
is it like that? Is it some settings?
So this one here
Mhm.
is, number one, it's not going to change because it's showing us at 3.7K. So it's, even if we did add those 4 to the 3.7, we're just not showing that many decimal places to be able to see that in here. If we had 1,000 people join all of a sudden right now, then it might come through, but it also might take a minute because our real-time report runs like parallel to, but separately from our like full-on reports, right? The gather still needs, the gather still needs to be dated. No, the data still needs to be gathered and processed before it feeds into the full reports. So if you remember when I was setting up the new account and it said that it would need like 24 to 48 hours until the numbers really started to show, same kind of idea. It's instantaneous in the real-time report, but it doesn't necessarily feed from real time into full reports immediately.
Okay.
Yeah. So looking at this report, it's important to pay attention to the time frame. In most of our reports on Google Analytics, setting our time period is going to be up in the top right corner. But because they want to mess with us for this homepage report, they put it down in the bottom left. So right now it's showing us the last 12 months. But if we wanted to look at just this year, for example, hey, there we go, much nicer. Now, what you might have noticed too there, last 12 months, that it's just like straight flat all the way until January. Because we didn't have Google Analytics on the Hackforge website until December, when I had us make a new website and put Google Analytics on it. Because some people were like, oh, we don't need that. And I'm like, I'm the boss, I say we do. So there it is. It's helpful. So yes, so that's why that looks a little bit weird. So for us, it makes more sense to look at it for this year, since we don't really have data prior to January anyhow. And so we can see that for this year, we had a big spike in around June. Yeah, interesting. What was happening?
Yeah, those events, those.
Yeah,
Yeah, your little.
you are correct, Steve. That was the accessibility series. Yeah. Yeah, so that's what that was. So cool. Nice to see that that sort of thing was what people were interested in.
There's a correlation. The universe makes sense.
Yeah, the universe makes sense. Now, what really stands out here is the key events are 0.
Did you define any?
I did not define any, correct, Steve? Why did I not define any? I don't really
Not
know.
a paid.
That'll come up in your employee review.
It will come up in my employment review. I mean, yeah, and that's the thing. I guess I talk a big game about planning and knowing what you want to be able to do with this data, so you know why you're gathering it. And I wasn't really sure. Because we hadn't had analytics on our site previously, and when we're thinking about what is the goal of Hackforge, building connections in the tech community, can quantify that based on website visits, like what part of our website visits really would, right? So I didn't want to set a key event and start gathering that data when I didn't know if it was going to be necessary. What up, Steve?
To be honest, lots of our clients, we don't set key events for our meetings, only because of that very fact. Like the baseline event capturing kind of gives you a volume and stuff. And we actually, for marketing, we really only care about closed sales. And closed sales with the accounting system. I mean, it would be nice to have, if you're an e-commerce business, it's nice to know who's looking at what product, who's how long, and are they doing all this good stuff. And I'll tell you guys, as data analysts, don't even listen to the client. Capture as many elements as you can without stressing the server, because they'll thank you later. Like think for them. Don't just listen to the marketing guy. Like, oh, I don't care about it. No, you want to capture it. Like, it's, you know, if the wind is coming out of the north, you can measure it on in a band, capture it. You never know if they're going to come in handy. So just, you know, and as long as it doesn't stress their server infrastructure, then you're not harming them. I mean, the way things calculate. But yeah, for key events, so first of all, you have to sit with the client. What are the key events? What's the journey you're trying to capture? And in a lot of cases, you're right. Like, we're seeing enough data here to know that, oh, there was a correlation to an actual physical event we saw. You do see an increase overall in your volume, and you start, now you know what increases. So for Hackforge, sure, that information is probably enough.
Right.
Yeah. But if you had an e-commerce site now attached to it with some merch, yeah, it'd be kind of nice to see if there was some conversion to, I'm using the old term, but yeah, some monetization come in. If you can attach that, that's always nice.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we could look at newsletter signups or event registrations.
So turn that around into monetizing opportunity for you guys. So say, you know, you work at some big boiler room, big company, and then all of a sudden you want to go off on your own. If you're producing reports and you're showing that you can come up with a bunch of canned stuff that a small or medium business can just say, hey, I'll pay a subscription for that. And it's an easy setup because you've already there. You got a nice little residual income there, because very few companies are doing decent straight up reporting from Google straight up. It's usually masked under a huge layer of, oh, it's through HubSpot, which, you know, $800 a month per user, forget that, or these other big platforms. But if you can just come up with a simple like Google subscribe reporting package, just preset, somebody will pay you $10 a month for that. And then you get 1,000 people doing that, well, then you're no longer worried about losing your job. Then you're just gonna hone your little stuff. And
So exchange contact information or work on it.
there you go.
go.
But like I said, like you guys are in a world now where you can start thinking about how you can monetize your efforts. And you know,
It's great advice.
don't get lost in the bureaucracy of some giant company. If you they'll only cancel your benefits and betray you in a decade, and then you're left with nothing.
So cynical, so
That's
cynical.
so reality.
It is, that is true.
Self-employed, the master of your own fate.
Yeah, self-employed is the way I do it. And it's yes, but also no.
Well, there's a
Right.
bit of starvation, stress, deprivation, you know, forget about having kids for a while, all that kind of stuff. But hey, if you get through that, all good.
It's all what you feel like.
It's horrors and terror either way, to be honest.
Amazing. All right.
Yes, okay.
Yeah. Sorry, I was gonna take the philosophy. I told you to start
Okay,
philosophy.
okay.
So, to take a look a little bit further at our reports and see a little bit of that terminology we were discussing earlier from our left side menu, we just click on reports. Yay, reports come out. So coming up in this sidebar here, if you remember when we were first setting up our account and I had the option to choose what my business goals were, and I chose baseline reports. If I had chosen user acquisition or one of the other goals in there, the list of default reports that would be showing in this sidebar would be different. Right now, these are like the very, very basic ones, but I can add others to this sidebar if I decide I want them. We won't worry about that right now. Let's just take a look at figuring out some of how all of this works and everything that it's telling us. So I had mentioned previously about the machine learning capabilities and the blue sparkles that it'll use to tell you where AI and machine learning are coming into play. So this is an example right here. They call it insights. So if I just click right on that, it is basically prompting me to ask specific questions of the data. Down here is also kind of showing some examples of that. My favorite part about this, though, is that I'm able to just search a question, see what is the most popular page. Top page title by users. Is that what you're asking? Yes, that's what I'm asking. And then it tells us right here in the sidebar. So that's pretty cool. I don't actually have to go through and find that report since I know that that's what I'm looking for. I can just ask it and it'll tell me. So our homepage is basically what it's telling me is the most popular one this week, which makes sense. Was this answer helpful? I'll say yes, because it's nice to, I like getting feedback, so I'll give Google feedback.
Feed Google.
Yeah, got to feed Google. It's very important. So in here, this is our report snapshot. So it's a little bit of an overview of everything. But if we want to see a little bit more specifics, let's take a look at acquisition. So user acquisition versus traffic acquisition. What is the user acquisition? Who can tell me?
First time users.
Beauty and traffic?
How many people
Most recent one, the most
Ah.
recent.
Close. It is the most recent visit. Correct. Yeah. So however they got here the most recent time. And then user acquisition
Yeah.
cohorts. This is the one that Steve was asking about. So this is where we're bringing in our channel groupings. Channel groupings are a confusing mess of nonsense that once you have them figured out can be quite helpful. So it is comparing aggregate data against each other. So one cohort is everybody who got to your website directly. So however many people accessed your website by putting it in their search bar, or maybe they have it bookmarked if they didn't bookmark a UTM code. Versus everybody who came to the website organically or through a referral. So what we're able to see in this line graph up here is that I don't see these colors to me look more or less all the same.
Yeah, they're kind of subtle.
Uh, so I don't love that. I don't know that I can really do anything to change it, but what we can do is mouse over and it will give us some information here. So basically what it's saying is we had 7 direct views on July 21st, yeah. So this top line here, the cohort, the group of people is everybody who got to our website directly versus the one person who got to our website through a referral. So why is this interesting? It's basically to see if there are trends in how people are accessing your site. So Steve, in your case, if you see like, for some reason, last week, everybody got to our website directly, but this week, everybody's getting to our site through a referral.
That would be more exciting because a referral is scalable. Whereas direct is like they have to punch in the actual URL.
Right, or use a bookmark, but yes. So that's basically just giving you more of a look at the different groupings.
Can you create
right?
custom channels? Sorry, you're up.
Yeah, so custom channels, it kind of comes with some preset ones. I don't know about creating a custom one. Probably.
Like say I want one for paid, like everybody who came in through paid ad 5. And then could that be in that report? Or-
So that would be a custom report.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So that is one of the changes that is worth discussing here as well between universal analytics or old analytics and current Google Analytics 4. The reports that it comes with out of the box are fairly static. There's some changes that we can make, we can sort it differently. I can change some of my groupings here, right? But overall, I'm not really able to play around with my dimensions as much on the basic report view. I do have to get into the Explorer to be able to do some of that. This is a huge pain.
And those are, and then you,
Yeah.
assume you can define them. Can you export and use those as, it's a template gallery, okay?
Yeah, so you can't do quite the same thing with dashboarding that you were able to do previously. So for anyone who didn't use the old analytics, basically you could create a dashboard that used all sorts of different types of visualizations for different data points. That's not so much a thing anymore. You can kind of build a report that is like different tabs, and each tab is a different type of report, but it's different. It's a little bit limited compared to what we saw before, but for some people, they would consider it better and more flexible. It's all what you're used to and what you want to get out of it. So this has been a lot, and we are coming into the last 20 or so minutes. So I know that y'all have been kind of asking questions as we went along, but I really want to open it up in case anybody has a question about anything else. Rob needs to drop off. Thank you so much for joining, Rob. Appreciate having you here. Josh, can you check the HTTP refer for traffic coming from that old UTM link? It's not a bad idea. I'm gonna check into that. I have to find really what the link is too, though, because really with that, what's happening is when I'm going to my traffic acquisition and then filtering it. So this, I can't bring up my client page to show you, but basically what was happening is it would have been campaign. So the session campaign was set to something. I don't think we've ever actually used UTM codes for the Hackforge site, so nothing should come up. But so let's say it contained the word event when it shouldn't have. So I don't even know the full UTM code. I just know that that word was being used when it shouldn't be. So I do have to dive into it a little bit more, Josh, to kind of see if I can even figure out what the whole URL is to be able to look into it at that level. But it's worth doing. This is interesting. Okay, so of the room, yeah, we've been asking questions as we go, but especially there was a couple folks who came in like later. I keep referring back to stuff that I said earlier. Do you need me to go back to any of that stuff that you missed? Because I don't mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you're okay, or you have a question on it? You're good. Okay, great, awesome. Way to be. How's everybody else feeling? Any specific questions here? You're good. You're good. Okay, so I think what we'll do now is the last 20 minutes or so will just be a little bit more chill. Everybody can kind of mingle, ask your own questions of each other, of me, if you want to, if you've got something specific on your Google Analytics account that you want me to take a look at. No promises that I can answer your question, but I will do my best. If you're shy and you just want to ask a one-on-one question, you can feel free to do that. If you want to get Steve's contact information, you can pester him and do that. We also have a pile of Hackforge stickers on the table up by the window if you want to grab one of those. And if anyone is not registered for our newsletter and you want to grab it, let me know that as well, and we can get you set up to receive that once a month. So thank you everybody for coming. Highly appreciate you here. For those joining virtually, I'm going to leave that running as well. So you can feel free to toss anything in the chat if you've got questions, and I will be happy to answer them. Thanks everybody for coming. This was fun.
Thank you.